Welcome to the Work Well, Live Well podcast. I'm your host, Leanne. Drawing on the foundations of wellbeing science and positive psychology, I share tools, tips and strategies for people to intelligently manage their wellbeing so they can flourish into working well and living well. Today's guest is Dr. Heidi Douglass, an American-trained clinical psychologist with 35 years of experience in the field of psychology. She is also certified in plant-based nutrition by the Colin Campbell Institute of Cornell University. Anxiety, depression, trauma, obesity and binge eating are her primary clinical specialties. Dr. Heidi helps clients resolve mental health concerns without the use of medications. Dr. Heidi established and is the lead trainer of the Mindful Eating program for Mindfulness Works, the largest provider of mindfulness training courses in Australasia. Dr. Heidi is a dynamic and engaging public speaker and workshop presenter. Providing training and lectures on mindfulness is a primary passion of hers. Please welcome Dr. Heidi. So, Dr. Heidi, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Leanne. This is exciting to be with you. I've never done a podcast interview before.
I hope that it's all that you are hoping for it to be or think it might be, and perhaps a little bit better. So we'd really love for you to share with the listeners what led you to meditation and mindfulness.
Well, it's interesting. I first came across it in grad school. I was doing a PhD in clinical psychology at Boston University, and I was at a site. Brown University had a training program that I was part of for a couple of years, and I did my dissertation on a DBT unit. And DBT stands for Dialectical Behavior Therapy. It was something created in the 80s by Marsha Linehan to help mostly women with significant histories of trauma who had borderline personality disorder. And I was part of their 5-day outpatient treatment program, which was an intensive DBT program to help women that were chronically suicidal, chronically self-injuring, and with significant mental health issues going on in addition. And so DBT is one of the few things that's really effective in helping women that have borderline personality, which can come with significant issues with emotion regulation. And the idea of the dialectical piece of things is that, we humans, there's certain emotions we like we head towards joy and happiness. We're all into that, right? But often people shut down, avoid, and don't go next to some of the more difficult ones, myself included, like grief, sadness. But the dialectical piece of things is to recognize that we as humans, we have this capacity to experience these polar opposites, and we can't be avoiding or shutting down the more difficult ones. Because if you never knew sadness or grief, you really wouldn't appreciate joy. If you didn't know dark, you wouldn't appreciate light. So yeah, that was my first exposure to mindfulness, to really get women to sit and think about, well, what are you feeling? Without judging it, without trying to shut it down. And teaching them that, you can actually breathe through this stuff. You don't actually have to respond to those thoughts. Through meditation practice, we can teach you how to distance yourself a little bit. Those thoughts are just brain activity. You don't have to respond to them. So it was really refreshing, because up until that point, I'd been trained by some of the people that invented cognitive behavioral therapy that we've been using for decades, people in Boston. And cognitive behavioral therapy is very much about challenging and reframing thoughts. It's about changing them, where mindfulness is different. And that third wave of evidence-based treatment, like mindfulness and acceptance and commitment therapy, and I would say parts of DBT, were about, look, we don't always have to be changing stuff. We can just learn that we don't actually have to respond to this activity. It's just brain activity. And that gives people a lot of power when they can realize that they don't have to, just because guilt comes doesn't mean that it's true. Just because, you get a thought doesn't mean you have to act on it. And I think there's great freedom in that. Then after I left that unit and stopped working there, I left mindfulness for a while, and I was doing other things. And it wasn't until I moved to New Zealand in 2011 that I got back into it through the mindful eating programs. Yeah.
And that's what we're going to be touching on today with mindful eating. How does mindful eating contribute to the well-being of others, and why is this important?
Yep. Well, so mindful eating is one part of what I do. I work in private practice these days, and mindful eating is one piece of what I do. So kind of if you look at the bigger picture, I'm as a clinical psychologist, my words are my scalpel, right? I can't give people medication, and I don't want to. Most people that I see who have mild to moderate depression, anxiety, overeating, they don't need to change their brain chemistry with medication. They need to learn how to have a different relationship with their thoughts, learn a different way to think, learn how to calm the body and understand what's going down when they're getting distressed. So on a typical day for me, I might have someone coming in to do mindful eating work with me because they're overeating. I might have someone come in and they're really stuck and feeling trapped in like this depressed or anxious place. So evidence-based treatment is what I'm offering to the public. And that's treatment, talk therapy that has been shown in research trials to be really effective to help people with things like depression, anxiety, trauma, overeating. Yeah. So, and how mindful eating can help. The form of mindful eating that I'm trained in is called mindfulness-based eating awareness training. And that was created in America in the late 90s by Dr. Jean Christeller and colleagues. She's a psychologist who had worked with John Kabat-Zinn at one point. And mindful eating is really helpful for people who struggle with emotional eating, mindless eating, binge eating, or for people who are overweight. It helps about half of people who are overweight, but it definitely can help curb this compulsive overeating, binge eating stuff that goes on with people. And often clients that are coming to see me for help with eating, they can be very critical of themselves and put themselves down a lot if they eat off plan. And one thing I really like about this program is that it brings in a lot of kindness and compassion and says, look, you're not overeating because you're an idiot. You learned a long time ago that it could help you. And it works. If you're anxious, depressed, or sad and you eat something like a sugary thing will give you a buzz, a carb kind of thing could help you feel more calm. So food works, to help you feel better.
This is just so very interesting. As someone who is overweight and has, I guess, experienced emotional eating throughout their life, I can really appreciate where, if you are feeling quite stressed at times, we might turn to food as that comfort. Well, what is mindful eating? How does that help?
Okay, so mindful eating means that when you're engaging with food, you're engaging with your full awareness, and you're doing it without judging and without being critical. And mindless eating is when you're eating without paying attention. You might be driving or being on the computer or watching Netflix and you're consuming food and you're not paying attention. You might not even be tasting it. Mindless eating is eating in response to triggers outside of yourself without really connecting with how you feel. Eating, using food to tune out to stress, to numb out, to disconnect. Hunger cues and emotional cues can sometimes be confusing, and mindful eating helps tease apart which is it coming from. Am I really hungry or am I distressed? Mindful eating is about reconnection. It's about reconnecting to our own built-in systems for hunger and fullness that many people don't even know they have. It's about reconnecting to savoring food, to be aware that you can use food for pleasure. That's not wrong, but we also need to think about the health aspect of things as well. So to get those things more in balance and to make wise choices and to let go of struggle, because pretty much, mindful eating says, look, you can eat whatever you want. This is not a diet, it's a lifestyle. And as long as you're paying attention to what's going on, because there's something called sensory specific satiety that humans have that most people have no idea what it is, right? So for example, a typical overeating scenario, someone's at home and they're watching Netflix and they've got a really big chocolate bar and they're just, it's very pleasurable to watch your favorite Netflix show eating chocolate, right? So they're doing their thing and they're eating whatever. And then they look down and they're like, oh, I ate the whole thing. And they're not even aware and they might not even have tasted it. But in the hands-on experiments that we do in mindful eating, we have people mindfully eat either some chocolate or potato chips slowly with their full awareness, without judging. And what people notice is that after maybe 3 or 4 bites, it doesn't taste so good anymore. You may notice that the chips are becoming more oily. The chocolate doesn't taste so sweet anymore. And often people just continue to eat because they remember that first bite was so good, and they're like chasing that taste again, but you don't get it again. But you're not noticing that it doesn't taste good anymore if you're distracted. So often people are amazed to think, wow, you mean I can still eat cake and still have chocolate? Yeah, of course. Just shut the TV off when you have it. And you won't feel like binging on the whole thing because it's not going to taste good anymore. And it could be after 4 bites, after 6. It depends on how hungry people are. But yeah, that's a built-in mechanism that humans have.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great point to make about turning the TV off or, the other distractions. I notice myself, if I'm working and I eat at my desk and I'm doing stuff at the computer, I might be eating my lunch at the same time and not even realize that by the time I've finished my last bite, I'm still feeling hungry because I haven't felt like I've eaten. Whereas I feel different if I am away from that, maybe sitting outside in nature and really enjoying the flavors of my food. Really, I feel more full. I feel more aware of how I'm feeling within my body. Is that what you expect people to experience?
That's one piece of what can happen. And so there's other different ways of there's different ways that people teach mindful eating, but some people have the misconception that it's just about eating slowly and paying attention. But there's a lot more to it than that. So in this evidence-based program that has a lot of empirical support, one key component is a daily meditation practice. And meditation, as you probably know, it's different than relaxation. It gives you more. So in MBE describes it as when you start a meditation practice, you'll notice the racket in your mind, that chattering mind, blah, blah, blah. But if you keep going, you'll start to notice the thoughts and emotions that you have. You'll start to notice the patterns of them, and they'll become more clear to you. And then if you keep going with your meditation practice, you get access to what MBE calls your inner wisdom, right? Your values. And Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust, said, between stimulus and response, there's a gap. And in that gap is your power. And so meditation practice helps dismantle compulsive behavior. It helps shut off autopilot. And I didn't believe it until like when I first met Jean Christella, she's like, do you have a meditation practice? I'm like, no. And I was very skeptical. And she's like, well, I'm not going to train you until you have one because you won't get it. Until you do it yourself, you won't get it, right? So I heard about all these great benefits of mindful eating, but I didn't experience this gap that they talk about where, because how it usually looks, right? For example, say someone is really distressed. They had a fight with their partner, right? That's the stimulus. And they get really distressed. And so they automatically could do things like go and eat a cake, drink a big thing of vodka, punch somebody, put a hole in a wall. And they may say, look, there was no gap. I just reacted. But if you do a significant mindfulness practice, even if it's just 20 minutes a day, but you do it consistently, what happens is the shit will still hit the fan because we're humans, right? And it's challenging being a human. But then you'll have this gap of like, oh, I could eat a cake. I could drink a bottle of vodka. Yeah, I could. But what else could I do? And you get access to that inner wisdom and the other things that you have as choices. And so I heard about that, and I didn't believe it until a couple of years ago. I had this big stressor that happened, and I'm driving home, and my mind wants to comfort me. I've been an emotional eater since I was a little kid, and your mind wants you to feel better. So I'm driving home, and my mind says to me, look, you're going to need to get a bottle of wine, a pizza, and a big chocolate bar. And if you consume those things, you're going to feel so much better. And it's right, I would. But if you do that a lot, your weight's going to be higher and you might become a drunk. So none of that's good, right? So I'm driving home, and then I have that thought. And then another part of my mind, without argument and without struggle like I used to have, says, yeah, at any time you can go downtown and get that stuff. But why don't you try something else? Why don't you get in touch with your best friend and tell her what happened? So I did. And that made me feel better, but it didn't resolve it completely. So my mind says, look, it didn't work. So now you're going to need a triple-decker peanut butter and jelly sandwich, because that's what Americans do for comfort, right? So you have 3 pieces of bread, jam on 2 of them, a big helping of peanut butter on the other one, and it's comfort food. So my mind throws that suggestion out. I'm like, yep, at any point I could do that, but why don't I do something else? So I tried a hot shower, and then I did 15 minutes of yoga, and my stress that had been like at a 9 out of 10 went down to like a 1. And there was no battling about should I or shouldn't I eat something. It was this inner wisdom thing was there for the first time, and it was really calm, and I felt so mature and like an adult. And I was like, wow, this is that thing they talk about. There's a lot of power in that. And that's one thing that's kept me doing a mindfulness practice for all these years is I like that space of feeling like I'm acting in line with my values. And, you know, I can't do it 100% of the time because I'm still a human, but maybe 90% more than I used to.
Yeah, it's such an important point to make that we are all humans, and even though we can have our best intentions, sometimes shit does hit the fan, excuse my language, and we do run off the rails. But we always have that choice, and that choice, the power of that choice is very empowering. It gives us that power, that understanding of where we want to move to, and the choice in you know, how we want to feel. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that because we're human, I think sometimes we're going to be really motivated and we're going to be on track and doing all these healthy behaviors. And then we're going to have times where you can pretty much bank on it that you're going to be doing the opposite, and you're not going to want to do your mindfulness practice, and you're not going to want to eat healthy, and you get into one of those places. So on purpose, for the last 4 years, I've been meeting with Yanavero, the former monk that we both share as our mindfulness teacher.
Yeah.
So probably on like every month for the last 4 years, I've been meeting with him. And it's been so helpful because because my mind is in this container, this mind-body container, I can't always see my own ridiculousness, my own frailty, my own being stuck. So, you know, to have someone like that is really helpful to support my practice. And then I go on solo silent retreats in the wilderness for a week at a time, where it's just me. I'm doing like 4 hours of meditation a day, and I'll have a call with him somewhere in the middle of the week. And it's a way to restart my program. And I'll do that a couple times a year because I definitely have time. I'll fall off the wagon and I won't do it. And this restarts
Yeah.
it.
Wow, that being out there in the wilderness on your own, very brave, but there must be a lot of insight that comes to you during that time.
Oh yeah. I mean, I didn't start with that though. You know, I went to one of Yanavero's silent retreats for 7 days. That was at a retreat center, the first one, right? Because sometimes people are very afraid. They think they're going to go crazy when they go on silent retreat and they don't talk, right? And obviously that didn't happen. And then I decided that sometimes when there's big groups, it feels more stressful to me. So I started just going by myself out into their meditation huts at this retreat center. And it was a little creepy the first time, but then I got used to it. And now I'll just take a tent and go out into the wilderness somewhere by myself. And
Wow.
yeah, and it's people will say, but don't you get lonely? And I'm like, when you're in wild nature, like it doesn't work if you do it in the suburbs, but when you're in wild nature, there's so much beauty and amazement going on that I never get lonely. And if you meet with someone like a former monk in the middle of it, you know, you get support about whatever comes up for you and what are you noticing. And yeah, it's really helpful.
Yeah, that's beautiful. What are the benefits that people will experience through mindful eating?
Yeah, so if people have the consistent meditation practice, they'll start to hopefully dismantle that compulsive behavior that we talked about and find that gap where they're not being so reactive. They'll be able to start to, because with the MB Eat program, it's not just eat slower and do meditation. There's a lot of skills that come with it, like teaching people to start noticing their internal triggers for eating, like being bored, needing pleasure, being stressed out, and external triggers around them that can get us eating, like driving past signs for fast food or ads on TV. And then they teach about this concept called behavioral chaining, where you know, our behaviors are all linked kind of like in a chain. For example, if somebody goes to a party and they have a really bad time and they get emotionally upset, they might start eating and then figure, well, I already blew it, so I might as well go home and eat some more. But it's kind of set up like a chain, and we can teach people how to dismantle these chains of behavior. So if people keep finding they're doing the same thing, they have particular patterns or certain times of day where they get in trouble, MB Eat can teach how to pull that apart, because there's certain styles of thinking that get people in trouble, particularly like all or none thinking. Like people will think, oh, well, this is good food, you know, broccoli is good, and anything delicious like cake or cookies, those are bad. And so I'm going to be good now because it's Monday or it's January 1st, right? And I'm only going to be good. And they'll go along with this very restrictive way of thinking. And so say they'll eat off plan on Wednesday, somebody will have a shout for their birthday. And then, oh my God, now I'm bad. Oh, I've screwed it all up. I might as well eat whatever I want for the rest of the week because I can't start again until Monday. So they'll learn things about that, like habits and conditioning. And we also look at body image issues and how you're labeling your body is going to be directly related to how you feel about you and your ability. And you can, often people are really limiting themselves and what they can do based on just, you know, bullshit in their head.
Yeah. That's fascinating. And I really related to that. I laughed because I've done that. I've been that person.
We all have done that.
I've stuffed up today. That's it. I'm off the wagon for the rest of the week. I'll get back on Monday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and I think too that people have been sold this oversimplified idea that, well, you know, weight loss is easy. You just need to eat less and move more. So if somebody's struggling with their weight, they can often feel guilty and stupid and like, oh, well, I must be defective because look how fat I am. And it's supposed to be simple, so I really must be messed up. But really, it's not that simple. There's a whole lot more going on. That whole idea that a calorie of broccoli is the same as a calorie of meat doesn't turn out to be true. Yeah, so it's a lot more complicated that, and the mindful eating program addresses that, and that's one thing that helps people feel like, oh, I don't have to feel guilty. There's a reason that the obesity rates are like 60 to 70%, and if there's a pandemic, you know, it's not just me.
Yeah, and nutrition is so important too, isn't it? I know that's another area of your expertise. In we feel different with the different types of foods that we eat. You know, if you eat good, nutritious food, you feel different within your body in comparison to perhaps processed foods all the time. Is it that you feel very different? Would that be something that people become aware of through mindful eating?
Yes. Well, so in mindful eating, they pretty much say, look, you can eat whatever you want, just do it mindfully. So if you want to eat a cookie, somebody offers you one, stop and say, am I even hungry? Because if you're not hungry, maybe you'll pass on it, or maybe you'll take it with you and have it later. And there's no foods that are off limits. But it's interesting. I think that you know, having worked in the field for 35 years, mindful eating is only one piece. It's one tool in the toolbox. Eating behavior is quite complex, and I don't think that mindful eating skills will be enough for everybody, because I think even though it's not in our DSM-5 yet, it's pretty clear to me that there's a subset of the population that would definitely meet criteria for like an addictive relationship with food. You know how, like, I have a friend, Kathy Vera Baker, she can keep M&Ms in her drawer at work, and she'll like have one every once in a while. Like, I just couldn't do that. Like, it would be a real problem for me. Just like some people can keep wine in the fridge and they'll have like a little bit and it'll be there for a month. So I think that the addiction model really applies to a subset of people who have eating issues, and MB Eat doesn't really get into that as much. And there's so much bad nutrition advice. You know, I got certified in plant-based nutrition a few years ago as a way to review the literature for the last 40 years on what we know about a healthy diet. And I can't tell you how many times people will be saying that they're eating healthy, but really they're eating in line more with myth and propaganda and the influence of the multi-billion-dollar food industry. So we know that, for example, people who follow a whole foods, mostly plant-based diet they can eat without calorie restriction, without limiting what they're eating, and lose weight and then maintain a healthy weight without much effort. This idea that one issue with meat is that in the big European studies, like the Panacea study, when they follow like tens of thousands of people forward in time, they found that when they statistically control for calorie intake and they compare the vegans, the people that just eat plants, to the people that eat meat and follow them forward 5 years, the meat eaters weigh about 5 pounds more, even when the amount of calories have been controlled for, which is pretty amazing. And they think it's due to the inflammation response that's caused in the body by eating animal products. And that can also be linked to depression. They have studies now that show when people have a diet heavy in animal products, there's more inflammation in the body and they can pretty much turn on and off depression. So yes, how you feel is directly related to how you're eating. It doesn't, if people work with me, I feel ethically obligated to let them know my understanding of the literature, but then they get to choose what they want to do. They don't have to become vegan. They don't have to become plant-based, but they do have, they should know what the research says so they can make educated choices that work well for them.
Mm. I like the way you put that, that they can eat anything they want, but I guess that gives you a sense of control over what we're doing, and the choice is with us then too, isn't it?
Yeah, and if somebody is feeling like they don't have any choice, that they're off the rails and feeling out of control, I mean, that might be someone who needs some help, because I can't tell you how many times people, they'll call me and they'll be like, look, I don't know what my problem is because I've read the self-help books. I know what to do. How come I'm not doing it? Right? and there could be a lot of different reasons, so one benefit of working with someone like a clinical psychologist like me is that we do a history and we do a full assessment. Because if somebody, say, has a trauma history and when they start to lose weight, they get really anxious because people are looking at their body more, that's not going to be helpful for weight loss. Or if somebody has a significant anxiety disorder or major depression, it's pretty hard to lose weight if you're using food to manage emotions. And if somebody tries to take your food away and that's the only skill that you have to manage stress, it's not going to go down well. So for some people, before I do anything with food, some people need to learn other skills. Because for some people, food is a primary pleasure, or for some people, it's their primary way to deal with their emotions. And unless we teach them other stuff to do, it'll be pretty hard to put food back into the fuel category.
Mm. What would be your advice for anyone wanting to start with mindful eating?
Yeah, well, Jean Christella, the woman who put together MB Eat, she wrote a book for the public. It's called The Joy of Half a Cookie. It's a great book, and it summarizes many of the different pieces of MB Eat. And if you're in Australia and you want Mindfulness Works to bring the mindful eating program over to Australia, send them an email.
Yes.
Because we've been running it here in New Zealand. There's a 3-hour workshop on mindful eating that I put together with the permission of Jean Christella. Also, there's a nonprofit that was set up called the Center for Mindful Eating. And at that site, there's a whole lot of free information and trainings available. And you can also search for a certified MB Eat provider near you. And in New Zealand, I put together a 3-hour workshop, and we've been running courses here through Mindfulness Works for a few years now. So if you're in Australia and you want Mindfulness Works to offer this 3-hour mindful eating workshop, send them an email.
Yes, because it has been so very popular over there, hasn't it?
Yeah, and it's a fun hands-on 3-hour workshop where we actually get people like doing the chocolate and chip experiment together so they can see it, and we sit and we teach people meditation. So that would be a fun thing to do. And if you're feeling stuck, don't wait. Ask for some help from a certified person.
Thank you. I'll share the links for the Centre of Mindful Eating, and I'll find the link for the Half a Cookie book.
Yes.
Yeah, so people can look that up if they want to.
Yeah.
So as we come to an end, I really do thank you. Do you have a wellbeing tip, a TED talk, perhaps another book or a quote that might be useful for the listeners?
Yes, I think that there's still quite a bit of stigma about people getting help for any kind of mental health issue, whether it's anxiety, depression, or food issues. People can still feel shy about requesting help, and I would love people to move past that, because we've got really effective skills that we can teach people. When you meet with a provider like me, I make it fun. I work online with people, so people in Australia can work with me online, but it's not like the old-fashioned ideas of therapy where, like, Freud had people lay on a sofa and he'd blame everything on their mother and tell them they weren't aware of anything. It's not like that. It's like meeting with any other professional. But my job is to help you get unstuck. My job is to teach you new ways to think that'll effectively get you out of that place that's not functional for you, and get you to be supported to make the changes that you want. And it also doesn't take a lot of time. I mean, I think the average number of sessions for me for depression and anxiety would be about 3. It'll take longer if people have more complicated presentations or if they've been struggling longer, but it's not a scary thing. People meet with accountants and people get mechanics to fix their cars. I mean, psychologists just help you fix your relationship with your mind body.
Yes. And can be very helpful, especially if you are feeling very stuck and don't have a defined direction. Speaking to a professional such as yourself really helps to work through and get that clarity and build that way forward.
Yeah, and I mean, most psychologists have their own psychologists to help us because, just like any member of the public, I can't always see my ridiculousness or my human frailty or how I'm stuck. And it's really helpful to have another trained professional who could say, Heidi, do you notice you're doing X, Y, Z? And often I'm like, no. Like, I can have bionic vision and super clarity on someone else's stuff, right? But with my own, I often can't see it. So, bringing in somebody to help is really great.
Yeah, that reminds me of the quote. I'm not sure where the quote comes from, but we can't read the label when we're stuck inside the jar.
That's awesome. I love that one.
I love it, and I think it's so relevant to the conversation. So we've come to the end of our discussion, and I thank you so much for the time that you've given to have this chat. It's been extremely interesting, and I know the listeners will find it very interesting too. So if people want to connect with you, how will they find you?
So I have a website, Dr. Heidi Douglass, with 2 S's on douglass.co.nz. So people can find me on my website. I'm on Instagram at Dr. Heidi Douglass _NZ. I'm on Facebook at Dr. Heidi Douglass with 2 S's. So yeah, people can send me an email. I give a free 15-minute consultation. So if people want to talk to me and get my input and see if I might be someone to work with, they can do that without charge. And yeah, and it's been lovely talking with you. I've had a really good time. So thank you.
Me too. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining me. I've included the links to Dr. Heidi's suggested resources in the show notes. If you found this podcast of benefit, please share it with someone you think will benefit too. I love to receive your feedback and would be grateful if you could rate my podcast on iTunes.